So the scripture today is coming to us from the book of Ruth in the Hebrew scriptures, chapter 1, verses 1 through 14. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem of Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephraimites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And when they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman Naomi was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard that in the country of Moab that God had considered the people of Judah and given them food. So she set out from the place where she'd been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way back to the land of Judah. But then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you to your mother's house, and may God deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May God grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." And then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. And they said to her, "No, we'll return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, and go your way. For I'm too old. I'm too old to have a husband. And even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they're grown up? Would you then refrain from marrying someone else? No, my daughters, it's been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of God has been against me." And then they wept aloud again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. I told you a little bit about my mom. My mom was kind of harsh, and she would probably say, "Bryan, don't make those poor people suffer through a stupid joke before you get to the sermon." I've been channeling my mom recently. I mean, I've given you a break from my jokes, just because. But my mom was kind of harsh, and she was the kind if I was out climbing a tree in the backyard, she'd yell at me, "Hey, if you fall out of that tree and break both your legs, don't come running to me." So sorry, Mom, but why should you never buy flowers, even on Mother's Day, from a monk? Because only you can prevent florist friars. All right. It's only when they're that bad that I will inflict them on you, all right? I've always been aware that Mother's Day is one of the sweetest and also most warmly sentimental days of the year, and also one of the most emotionally laden days as well. And I appreciate that not only after 5 years, or getting on to 5 years now, are some of you, cracking bald jokes all the time at me, but some of you are comfortable enough with me that you've said, and they're not here, "I'm not coming to church on Mother's Day." because I know you're going to say all these warm things about moms, and my mom was a mess, and it's a complicated day for me, and I can't take it. And then there are others who have just experienced too much pain and heartache. And some who have literally lost children. And they're just like, I just can't do it. So, thanks for being here today. Those of you who are courageous enough, even though your life might not be a Hallmark card, to come to church today. And I hope and pray this service has been and will be, the remainder of it, meaningful to you. So just let's all hold the complexity of Mother's Day together as a community. And I want you to just turn to the people on either side of you and just say, I'm really glad you came today. All right, just go ahead. Just say it to each other. I'm really glad you came today. All right, now, today's Mother's Day's message is going to be a bit different, because I'm going to focus on what I think is probably the Bible's most famous mother-in-law. Talk about deepening the complexity, right? But the Bible's most famous mother-in-law is Naomi, the mother-in-law of Ruth. And just in case you don't know it, let me quickly tell you the story of the book of Ruth, the basic thing. Naomi was married to a man named Elimelech. They had 2 sons. They lived in a foreign land away from Palestine, the land of Judah, in Moab. The 2 sons married foreign women from Moab, one of whom was Ruth. A great famine swept the land. And all of the men in Naomi's family died, presumably of starvation. Her husband died of starvation. I don't know if you've ever been close to starvation, but that's quite a thing to witness. Her 2 sons married women from that land, but after a number of years, they also both died, presumably of starvation. And only the women were left. So for any of you who have lost children, either literally or relationally, you have a connection to Mother Naomi. As we've noted many times together, the Bible was written in a very patriarchal time and culture, completely male-dominated. It's amazing we even have this story, because women being resilient and resourceful and courageous on their own is a key part of this story. Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law, who were probably also, by the way, in the process of being severely malnourished, lost the men, which meant they lost their security. In that culture, the only acceptable way for a woman to make it was to attach herself to a man. Thank God that reality is finally changing. Still have a ways to go. But this was their reality. So Mother Naomi, as moms almost always have to in times of crisis, had to step up, get through her own grief somehow, and try to move forward. So she says to her 2 daughters-in-law, I've heard there's some food where I came from. Let's go. And they start on the journey to Judah, and then all of a sudden Naomi has this get real moment. And she says, wait a second. I'm too old. No man's going to be interested in me. It's over for me. And no men in my country are going to take you, foreign women, as their wives. You need to go back where you came from, to your mother's house, and find another husband. You're young enough, you can do it. And then she says, it's more bitter for me because the hand of God has turned against me. That wasn't true. But I'm glad it's in there, because when something tragic happens, it often feels that way. Or people wonder, We've talked about that before. Did I do something wrong? Is God punishing me? No, it wasn't. And the rest of the story is about how God miraculously, beautifully cared for all of them, and that they eventually were led by God into a new life with renewed joy and laughter, even on the other side of all that heartache. But one of the daughters, Orpah, says, okay. And they cry together, and she kisses her mother-in-law, and she goes home. And Ruth says, no. I'm not leaving. Don't ask me to leave you. I will never leave you. I'm going with you. You're my mother. I'm your daughter. And if we die there, I'm going to be buried in the land of your people. It's one of the most beautiful stories of woman-to-woman solidarity and loyalty. Okay, we're going to leave Naomi right there for a second and take a bit of a left turn, and then we'll come back to her. I've been waiting for a long time to introduce you to a theological strand in the history of the church, and it's known as the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna is more than just the notion, we have decentralized whiteness in our art. It's more than just the notion that biblical people were not necessarily white. I can't take the time to get into the origins of it, and historians and scholars don't agree on it anyway, but it's connected to the emergence of a painting of Mary and Jesus that was found in a church in Częstochowa, Poland. Now, Tom, would you please put that slide up for us now? Art historians suggest that this painting goes back as far as the 6th century. Go to the next one. There's another version. Yeah, okay. Just leave it there for a sec. It was found in Częstochowa, and as with other forms of sacred art, there were claims that miracles were happening for people when they would focus on this painting. And there's these two, there's actually more research I did. I found an actual photograph of the painting, and it's a little bit different. This is kind of an approximation of it. And so look it up. I had already given Tom 2 versions of the slides. I wasn't going to give him a third. But people began making annual pilgrimages to see this sacred painting of the Black Madonna. And miracles were happening. In the 1700s, finally, one of the popes canonized the picture, and it became a sacred site officially, kind of along the lines of Medjugorje in the former Yugoslavia, or the appearances of Mary in Guadalupe, Mexico. And while I was researching, I also found some amazing paintings by an artist from Milwaukee who was recently commissioned to create some new art in the tradition of the Black Madonna. So go to the next slide, Tom. This is the artist, Amr Noorsema. And here are 4 pictures of Black Madonna, more contemporary ones, that we could actually purchase prints of these and have as part of our artwork if we want. Go to the next one. They're just beautiful. Okay. Now, the spiritual teacher who has brought the meaning of the Black Madonna alive for me, most meaningfully, is a guy named Andrew Harvey. And here's some of what Andrew Harvey says about the Black Madonna. He said, the Black Madonna is a burned and seared, anguished, and infinitely strong, dignified mother. He depicts the Black Madonna as blackened by grief, but ennobled and made adamant by secret mystical knowledge. This knowing she has discovered through her agony, which she represents with dignity. Harvey holds that the Black Madonna accompanies us in our worst anguishes and humiliations, representing endurance and faith, which is transmuted by God's grace into wisdom. Paraphrasing Harvey, The dark queen of heaven guides us into the highest mysteries. The Black Madonna provides immense inspiration to compassionate service and the immense alchemical power of transformation through intense joy and deep grief. Finally, he says, the Sacred Heart of Mary is the Black Madonna's force stream of the intense enlightenment that follows the acceptance of all our emotions as they are enduring all things, even the most agonizing losses, to perceive the deepest mysteries of existence. In other words, the Black Madonna is a symbol of the things you only know and learn through your deepest tragedies and hard times. So back to Mother Naomi. Naomi was a Black Madonna. A mother who went through the fire and who was given the grace to not just keep going, but to thrive again. And some of you, in this sense, are Black Madonnas. And you know, this isn't just a tradition for those who have been or are literally mothers. It's really just about love. But the love that's so deep and intense that it makes you vulnerable. And that's the scary thing about real love, isn't it? I mean, the deep love. It costs to love. It is a risk to love deeply, always. It takes you to the end of yourself where you're not calling the shots. You're not in control. You might get devastated. But as James Finley puts it, God protects us from nothing, but sustains us in everything. To love deeply means we're going to hurt deeply sometimes. Oh, we'll also laugh and delight and experience the best joy in love also. It's a package deal. When God came to earth in Jesus, God didn't come and show us how to be a success. It wasn't 7, habits for highly effective people. God came and got God's heart broken. God lost a child. Mary, the mother, lost a child. There's some things we only learn by being, quote, blackened by the fire of deep suffering. That's the point. That's part of what the cross is all about. Remember in our Meaning of the Cross series, we said part of what the cross of Jesus tells us is that God knows our suffering. You know the spiritual, nobody knows the trouble I've seen? Well, God knows. And mothers who have experienced great pain and heartache know. All right. I'll skip over a few things. So what was the sermon about today, honey? I'm not sure, but I think he told us we were all black. Kinda. And of course, black-skinned people know the truth of the Black Madonna tradition in ways that those of us with lighter skin, at least in this culture, do not. The same for black countries. And I'm going to close today by singing a song for you. As most of you all know, I've done work among some of the poorest communities in Haiti for over 30 years. I've taken about 70 group trips to Haiti. I hope when the political situation chills out a little bit that some of us can go there and you can experience this, and I'll introduce you to my beautiful friends there. But one of the places we always work is with Mother Teresa, who never had a child of her own, by the way. But she was called Mother because of the quality and the depth of the love that she had. And one of the places is an orphanage of sorts called the Children's Home. And when you pull up there, and our groups always volunteer there, when you pull up there, there's usually on the street outside a line in the morning of 30, 40, 50 mothers with malnourished children, trying to get some semblance of medical care or to just give them away. I will never forget the first time one of the mothers asked me if I would take her baby. Would you please take my baby home? I can't feed him. So I'm going to just share a song. You'll see the connection with Mother's Day. It's about a true experience that a young teenager had, a 14-year-old girl who went on one of these trips with me. And something happened to her on the last day of the trip. It touched her so deeply she couldn't even talk about it. And I didn't hear about it until months later at a retreat that she was helping to lead. So it's called Sarah's Song. I took a bunch of teenage pilgrims, a couple of worlds away, to get their first world adolescent hearts broken open by the so-called third world's pain. We played around and laughed a lot as the Spirit broke open our lives. We ate grape juice soaked bread and became a little body of Christ. There was one young woman, her name was Sarah, and she was ready to hear the Spirit speak. And from the moment she walked through that orphanage door, she had tears running down her cheeks. And they were tears that come from reaching the summit of some personal mountaintop. Tears that come from being free to feel what must break the heart of God. About 8 months later, I was doing my wandering troubadour thing. Another church teenage retreat, and this one was called a youth happening. And that same girl, Sarah, was one of the youth leaders, and she was given the task to preach. And in the course of her well-crafted message, she said, "I'd like to tell you what happened to me." She said, "Last summer, I volunteered in a Haitian orphanage for the better part of a week. And my heart got just stolen away by this little boy who wouldn't let go of me. So I spent most of the week just holding him. And on the last day when I had to leave, he called me mama. He called me mama. And when that orphan called me mama, well, it was like God was speaking my name. And ever since that day, everything's changed. She said, "You know, I used to think I'd probably be a chemist. I had my life all figured out. But ever since I took that trip to Haiti, it's like God's turned my whole life upside down. And you know, I think I might do something different now, like maybe some kind of ministry." It's kind of hard to explain to my parents, 'cause all I know is something happened to me when that orphan called me mama. Well, it was like God was speaking my name. And ever since that day, ever since that day, ever since that day, everything's changed. I'm not the same. Well, Sarah and I had a great conversation about the fact that you can be a chemist and a minister. And I think that's the path that she took, and using her chemistry to try to deal with issues like climate change, et cetera. All right, well, enough for one day. You'll be glad to, next week in church, you'll get out of here probably at 11 o'clock. Yeah. And we're going to close by singing along with my favorite mother, which is my daughter, Emma. And she's going to sing a song that Jack Hicks wrote the lyrics to. We've sung this together before. Let's all stand together. You've been sitting for a while. And the lyrics will be on the video, and just sing along as best you can.